Awesome, thank you. So my name is Mike Barmonde. I am a product marketing security specialist with Campus. I know that's not necessarily the title that I think people want to hear, but I think you can think of me more as an analyst, especially with what we do and how we do it, right? Nutanix is an infrastructure company. We do hyper-converged infrastructure. We take your network and your storage and combine them into one, and we create a very secure infrastructure that you can run your workloads on. Okay, that's what we do in a nutshell. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how to raise the DEFCON on your data. Is that a little bit kitschy? Yeah, I would think so. But really what this is focused on is more awareness around what kind of the threats are that are happening around us, and what we can do to elevate our security posture around that. So again, a little bit about me. I think the thing to consider right now, the simple statement is that we're at war. Okay? We're at war, and cyber warfare is here. A lot of you might be saying, but hasn't cyber warfare? Yes, it has. In gray areas all the time, right? You take everything from Stuxnet till now. Are those events really, events that actually lead to more of a wartime posture potential? Not the way that, most traditional private sector people would see it, but overall we are. The Ukraine-Russia conflict is the first global conflict where cyber warfare in this context has become put mainstream. In fact, there's an article yesterday about how Russia's initial attacks on the Ukraine were more catastrophic than they thought, right? But it was only when they were boots on the ground that actually created this mindset in people's minds around, is warfare happening? What does that mean? So kind of an interesting subject. So it's evolved, and there's cyber incidents that are happening right now around us, right? Nation states and private hacking organizations, critical infrastructure, and energy companies in that crosshairs. There's a little company called Colonial Pipeline, right? One thing that people don't realize at every level of the game is with how integrated digital technology is these days, it can actually create physical events in the real world that are catastrophic, right? Stuxnet was kind of something similar, right? It ran a centrifuge point that blew something up, and Iranians were like, what happened? This is our problem. It's now evolved, right? There's actually information about how a ransomware attack in Louisiana created such downtimes on their systems that a patient died because of the lack, and the family was suing because of the lack of response and availability for that patient to be served. So we're starting to see the real world implications of how something like this is happening, and infrastructure and energy companies are in that crosshair. So the other interesting thing that is really fascinating to me, I think, as the community as a whole, is that innovation is happening in real time publicly. Okay, this isn't any more kind of black ops that happens behind the scenes that happen. This is actually United States at a public level saying that it has secretly gone into public private sector networks and removed Russia malware in lieu of cyber events that we have. That's a fascinating concept if you think about the wartime mentality that's surrounding the data and how to upload that, right? If you have a nation that's willing to come out later and say publicly at a national level, we've gone into your network and we've done this for you, great job. What does that say about the security of what else you're doing, right? These 0 days are now being used internally as offensive preemptive measures to reduce the blast radius. That's pretty fascinating stuff. And again, aligning the homeland security mentality even beyond this proactive action is critical. So the U.S. president, right? They launched their executive orders around that first time in history that those type of initiatives have come from that level of government across the board, right? To mandate existing government employees to mandate these cybersecurity measures across those pieces. It becomes massively important to understand exactly what to do in these things. So we understand that all this stuff is here. That's great. And from a private sector standpoint, which is where I'm from, kind of a side note, I've never served before. I'm a private sector person, so my outlook is kind of unique. But I'm fascinated by the way that the government and the federal space actually takes ownership of this. But what's interesting is how the private sectors are demanding assistance. The cybersecurity professionals here, 95% of them say that government should play a bigger role in securing non-government organizations, right? 95% are saying, we don't think we have the capabilities to protect at this level what's happening here, right? This is very small here, but the very first one says improve and strengthen NIST standards from the private sector. They're demanding this, almost 50% are demanding help to actually get to that level. It's a fascinating kind of corollary between the private sector and what they're demanding and what we can provide. And what that means is that better threat responses is critical here. The average time of remediation after detection was 17 days for Log4j. So I think we were all probably part of that, that craziness that happened in December of last year. Average time to remediation was 17 days, which means systems which could be exploited remotely were patched faster, 12 days. But you still had a 12-day window before any kind of patching or mitigation actually took place. And that slowed down in the first month too, meaning, all of a sudden new priorities came in, those tier 2, tier 3 systems kind of like, they kind of settled off, it was really tough. So the other interesting part is that one of the other correlates is it takes over 3 months on average to develop the knowledge, skills, and judgment to defend against breaking threats, right? So interesting thing to think here, if you take Log4j into the context of how it impacted the private sector, more importantly. Do you think any of these organizations now have the foresight to say, okay, we're gonna do a 3-month focused initiative to actually train our teams to take down this time frame, right? And that goes back to all the information we talked about, right? The government coming in and patching stuff for yourself. We simply don't have the resources or time, and that goes to the cybersecurity skill shortages we're seeing in the industry as well, right? It's becoming super critical. 12 days is too much, way too much. So what does that mean, right? You know all the problems, right? I'm not teaching you hopefully anything new. What really is critical here is what's called wartime planning. And this is a different mentality than what you would think otherwise when it comes to, this is a little light here, when it comes to these pieces, but it really comes into 3 parts in terms of planning. Number 1 is identify, right? So bottom line is that there's 3 areas we really see the identification piece be critical. Number 1 is API security. And there's a lot of places to start. These are some of the hottest areas of that. So API security, API traffic's increased 681% the last year, set against a 321% increase over API traffic. And 95% of those surveyed said that they've experienced an API security incident. You might be thinking, so what? It's API, right? It's an application program interface. Like, what are they going to do? Release some data? But if you think about the lateral movement and a lot of incidents within a network, this is the first step. And if you have open APIs, non-authenticated APIs, the fundamentals that are there, which you can take advantage of, it's so easy to be able to take advantage of something like that to start the lateral movement to understand exactly what's going on. Number 2, we're all very aware of this, right? SolarWinds, the software supply chain. In fact, a lot of the new NIST pieces that are out there actually focus on helping improve the supply chain and what's happening there. So, again, supply chains have increased 51% the last 6 months. And again, those of you write down stats, I have sources on all this. I'm glad to give you this presentation. We can talk after the webinar, so you can see us at our booth. No problem. The study showed that 52% of those survey respondents felt that the company and suppliers are equally responsible for the security of the supply chains. So as a customer, as an entity, if an incident happens on the supply chain, what's going to happen with that stat? It's going to go like this, right? And you don't want that to happen, especially when it's time to talk about incident response and how that happens. Supply chain's been a big deal. It's been all over the place. Nutanix, ourselves, we use a lot of open source binaries in our stuff. So understanding that, how it's integrated into our product lifecycle, use security development lifecycle, which is sort of referred to what we do, still a huge risk, huge risk. So with these pieces, right, the identified pieces actually, and this is one of my favorite parts, is asset assessment. Regardless of any of this, right, you have to know, looking back here, what software do I have? What assets do I have? What APIs do I have? If you don't know, you're just going to be trying to, find a needle in a haystack and pick it out. There's just going to be a lot more hay that's coming on. So here's a little, area that I came up with, a little corollary about, what you can do to actually assess, what assets do I have, apps, data, or otherwise. What are the most critical? A lot of private sector companies, especially, have not done this. It's becoming more apparent, right? Move to public cloud. They want to understand what data and information that they share. But overall, the concept is they don't know. They don't know. They haven't tiered them. They're not sure. So understanding that is number 1. Number 2, what is the risk outcome if one of these assets is destructed or destroyed? Number 3, how long could an asset be down before it impacts your operations? Are the assets identified resilient? Is there a continuity plan for them when something happens? Who owns these critical assets internally? And have you created security groups internally to be in constant conversations about protecting these assets? Right? It's understanding this and moving it up the chain as you go. Have you enacted or contracted red, purple, or blue teams to perform offensive and defensive community plans, right? So many in the private sector, and I imagine in other places, especially in the public sector, right? State, local, and education, they don't have the resources to have offensive type focus. It goes back to that slide a little while ago where we're talking about, hey, Private sector and those people, they are demanding help to figure this out. So offensive is something that's really lacking. Are you part of the industry and key regulations, right? And how are you meeting those for your assets? If not, are you reaching out to industry peers? I know security, information sharing is kind of a faux still these days. And then if you have a plan to look to new threat vectors like software supply chain APIs, again, going back. So what are you doing to identify new stuff at this point? It's a great assessment just to get at a high level, an executive level of thinking about strategic goals, but also tactical initiatives. Number 2 is plan, right? So this is the critical thing. Plan, 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 plan. So there's a lot of ways to plan for. There's all these frameworks out there, right? You got your CISA cybersecurity framework, you've got zero trust, you've got all these different things. The key is focus on what matters to you as an entity. It gets very overwhelming very quickly to take all this in this concept and say, where do I start, right? Zero trust isn't binary, right? It's not a switch you can flip like encryption and it just works. It is a strategy, it is a concept right now. It takes multiple vendors, it takes cultural level action inside of your entity to actually help solve. It becomes critical. So, federal agencies have now been extended, right, to 2024 to get to a zero trust level of architecture. But what does that really mean? Right? Yeah, I know. I see some last crowd. What does that mean? Like, is there again? It's simply just even in draft format, so hard to try to solve for. So the plan part is more focused on you. There's going to be things, especially on the gov and fed side, that you're going to focus on. You need to solve for, but you can't get overwhelmed. You got to focus on what matters to you, and that's why going back and looking at this assessment is going to help you to focus. Right? Focus on the assets that are most critical, and then apply your strategy and your plan to them, whatever that may be. Okay. So number 3 is act. So this is one of the great parts about, I guess, the byproduct of living in a world where everything is under attack, is that we now have organizations that are meant to, and initiatives are meant to simplify things quickly. As an example, CISA has a new thing called Shield Up, and there's so many of these that come out. I'm not sure if anyone knows. This is a very quick and easy, definitive way to help you stop ransomware right now. It's a Shield Up initiative, helps you focus on that. It's directly related to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's helped to accelerate the executive order, the EO that came out, and to focus and to give you some tactical things you can do right now. Basic things like, hey, make sure you have multi-factor authentication turned on for critical apps and data, that type of stuff. I highly recommend you look at CISA's Shield Up. It's really good at that. So number 1, understand the executive order. I think is critical on the action piece, what you need to do. Stay up to date on the latest threat and threat vectors. It's really hard these days, right? Something like a SOAR or threat detection is going to give you the best insight. A lot of you probably have siloed data lakes or data silos. That would be a good time to start to try to even understand correlatorily, the anomalies that happen there. I know, as an example, one of the things that Nutanix just built in, because we saw a direct correlation to this, is we have a filer that runs on top of our system. And so we actually created a dashboard called Datalink. Within this is now something brand new just released, a user behavior analysis piece that allows us to understand, a deviation of a common user doing something. All of a sudden he's using the same file every day, all of a sudden he starts to look at files outside of that, or you can access other things. We'll actually bring that to your attention and hopefully integrate that with your SOAR and you can understand it. Okay. Number 3, fast track implementation recommendations. Again, don't let this overwhelm you. Focus on the assets, what's most critical. Focus on implementation recommendations that are associated with that in line with this. Again, Shields Up is a great resource to understand how much quickly can I add things like MFA, more than perimeter type things. Work almost on the outside and working within. Don't get too frustrated by how big this ask is. It's a big ask from the outside in. So, real quick, I'm going to go over how Nutanix can help. So number 1, we help you create a secure platform, right? This is all in reference to this. As I mentioned before, we're an infrastructure piece of hardware, and what this means is that we have a massive scalable operating system that runs on top of this that's storage focused. What this means is that we can run all your workloads securely. So when it comes to things like bad actors, malware, network compromise, DR, data breach, we can help solve for these things, especially in the context of zero trust, business continuity, and data breach prevention. We can help solve for these conceptually. This means that when you have people that want to attack, discover, intrude inside your environment laterally, we can help you prevent, detect, respond with extra defense and depth tools, right? We're not going to solve this end-to-end. I'll be very upfront about that, right? Any vendor that comes in and says, we can solve this end-to-end, it's a false flag. You need to focus on the integration of your tool sets or what makes sense for you, best of breed or what you currently have. And that's what Nutanix does great. We give you a hardened platform, we help secure workloads, we give you resilient networks. Not only that, you can run any of your solutions on top of us. Sure, we have a native virtualization solution that we have, but if you have VMware, if you have Hyper-V, if you have these virtualization tools, you don't have to worry about the hardware anymore. It becomes invisible in that context, and we can help with that. And this includes all of our different partners, including Cisco, who was in here before, who's awesome. That talks about exactly what we can solve for that. Last is, this is an eye chart, there's a reason for that, is strategic alignment. So when you're talking about things like zero trust, you know, you're like, okay, can you just do it or can you not? It's not that easy. So what we've done is we've tried to simplify our zero trust response into the concept of these are our capabilities from more of a menu perspective, right? Slap it down. Look, let's talk about your gaps. Let's talk about what you're trying to implement, and let's see if some of the features that we can help you with can actually, solve this right then and there. And then we can also give you business value down the road to integrate with other solutions to prevent, detect, and respond. Okay, this is things that we can absolutely help with. Again, to reiterate, the time to act is now. It's never been a more critical time to set these things aside and really focus. Again, phase one, focus on assessing your data. That's going to be the most critical. Understanding those workloads or those data pieces that are most critical for you, start there. Focus on a targeted plan in accordance with that, right? Whether it's something like zero trust or even the NSA came out with the network infrastructure security guide. And they even say inside of that, look, zero trust isn't our thing. If you look at this new NSA guide, zero trust is a cool concept. We actually focus on what you can do right now to secure your networks. Some of these pieces are lost, I think, in the cloud that is the advice coming out from things. So focus on a targeted plan. And number three, act, right? Act on phase three. So shields up. Go there, get some tactical pieces on what to do. And as always, Nutanix is here to help to create that secure platform to allow you to do it. I will give you my information. You can always contact me. You can see us at our booth here. We're more than willing to help you and to help understand exactly what you're focused on. Right now, though, is the time to act more critical. Again, assess, align with what's the easiest based on that assessment of your critical workloads. And then number three is really just go out and get it done. Put those things that are easier to kind of integrate into your system. Okay? That's it. Quick and easy. I know it's one time. Questions? Yes? Yeah, sorry. No problem. So 20 years in private sector IT and 7 years focused on security product marketing. So I came from, I worked at Mazda Motors, I worked for some healthcare places, I worked for AT&T in the private sector, mainly around virtualization. So again, it's this unique time in the industry where the security that's affecting nation states is now starting to affect the private sector. This gray area that is creating is growing rapidly, and our response is critical to work together. So even coming here and having a conversation with some of you, it's been a great experience to learn so much about what you're doing. So, what else? It's pretty straightforward, to be honest, right? We just wanted to give you some thought leadership on what we see and some of the new assets that are out there that can help you. Again, we're more than willing to help talk to you about things. Barbecue.
Yeah, just a quick question. Yeah. I'm pretty familiar with Nutanix. I use it there on the civilian side, mainly around virtual desktop deployment, but I'm not real familiar with it in terms of how it can help you from a security perspective. So you mentioned one thing about identifying anomalies. Like, what else, is built into the platform that provides different security, enhancement?
I mean, let's take your example of VDI, right? I mean, VDI is one of those, I would call it an application solution that sits on top and kind of don't worry about this.
Right, exactly.
The concept is these days, right? You take, the latest VMware 0-day incident allows you to exploit those things. At some point, it's going to get down even lower. So what Nutanix does is, in the concept of VDI, right? One thing we can do at the platform level is we take your secure technical implementation guide, your STIGs, right? We have an XML format. We can actually implement those across all of our hardware, and then we actually create an automated agent that sits on those. And what it does is it looks for any deviations. If there is one, it reverts back and alerts you.
Okay.
So it starts there with like automatic, STIG implementation, and then goes up. That includes the next level is really the data side of it, right? So we can encrypt data. We have data at rest and data in transit now. Between encrypting those type of pieces, we're FIPS 140-2 certified. We're common criteria certified. We're on the DOTA APL.
Okay.
right? So that's the other piece that we have. So again, moving up the stack to the data piece, we talked about the data lens that I talked about that allows us to look at the anomalies that happen on your data level.
Yeah.
Again, all critical to VDI. And then finally you get to the workload. One of the things I didn't talk about today was microsegmentation.
Okay.
So most of the time you have this gigantic bucket of software-defined network. You're like, oh my God, it's almost worse than a stick to implement. What Nutanix has done is we actually looked at the secure parts of that, and we pulled them out, and we created something like microsegmentation you can do quick and easily without doing the rest of the SDN approach.
Okay.
So identifying the different flows, number one, planning for those, and then securing those to say, okay, the user comes in, and based on the workflow, they only want to get to this file, we're only going to allow them to.
Okay.
Lower blast radius. So that's in lieu of all that assisting VDI, that's one way you do it.
So like,
Yeah, go ahead.
is that limited to just user houses, or is it a system and also like service level?
Yes, we can do IP level, like we can actually do IP to IP, we can look at actually create application groups based on applications, and we can look at the user level, yeah, some more systems.
So if I'm like, let's say I'm hosting a set of microservices or APIs or whatever within the Nutanix solution, can it also get down to that level in terms of helping secure?
Not yet. You know, like you're talking something like an NCAP, right? Like, yeah, we can't do that yet.
Okay.
So what we do is we do provide a lot of APIs. A lot of what we do are authenticated. APIs are new rollback access-based APIs. So we help that for our own set of APIs.
Yeah.
But
But not something a customer builds within.
no, unfortunately not. No, that's more like workload focused, like
Yeah.
in that workload. I would love to have something like that though. So.
Oh, we have partners like Salt Security.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, exactly. So we have a great partner ecosystem that can help take care of that.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious. I've always been a fan of things.
Yeah, it's simple and easy. I mean, I think the number one thing we do is we take all the operational complexity that exists between your tool sets, and we really try to push that out to the front of the people, admins that are managing those, and make it one-click, dummy simple to do this great piece. But then if you want that analyzation, those analytics in the back end, we allow you to siphon that off to the teams. Great questions, yeah, thank you. Anything else? This is barbecue. Appreciate it.